Welcome to the CRM show. Joining us today, we have Rod and Chris.
Hi, everyone.
In this show, we spend our time basically digging some of the latest news in AI and try to share insights with you, the practitioners, from the practitioners in order to get you start using AI. In this week's show, we're going to talk a little bit about AI use cases that are forming up in the services sector. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time to talk a little bit about Goldman Sachs' latest report, basically trying to understand what kind of value are we getting from AI. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how AI could jump away from the plateau that we're currently facing technically in order to get to a level in which we could all benefit from AI. And lastly, we will talk a little bit about the economics of AI in general. And then we have, for a non-German speaker, it sounds like a scoop for me, which is a story around Aleph Alpha, which we'll spend some time to talk about that as well. And without further ado, we shall start off with our first one. A lot of businesses in the UK services based. And I've been thinking about, a lot of how AI could possibly change the way services business are done. And just so happened, FT came out with two articles to talk a little bit about how wealth managers are utilizing AI. To a certain extent, even investors are utilizing AI in order to go around wealth managers. And same time, AI are also being implemented within contract management, which begs the question, what will lawyers do, or at least some of the solicitors do on the contract management side? And I thought this would be a good time to at least start the conversation on see how the use cases in the services businesses are shaping up. And with that, I would love to get your thoughts, both of you, practitioners in your rights. And I will start with you, Chris. Overall, what are your thoughts around the, I would say, impact on the services business, especially as it leads up to what it is we're doing right now? So love to get your thoughts about both, I guess, wealth management as well as legal or other services business.
Sure. And when we talk about service businesses, we talk about business models and industries that are lightweight or do not necessarily have a physical component, such as transportation or mining or any of these kind of things. But we really speak about pure services that are done between human to human, but are based on intellectual and mental activities. And I think that's really important because that's also what we see gets disrupted most. Anything that is online, digital. Previously talked about copywriters, we talked about design and marketing and anything that's in the creative space. Now, when it comes to like legal or wealth, I think the articles were very interesting. I think one of the articles mentioned a guy that used AI to do his investments and seemingly was able to get a 30% return, which is great and, lucky for him. But honestly speaking, the question really is whether or not it was really AI that was the key here or just, again, randomness of life. I actually think there were these experiments where they did similar things with monkeys and probably had a really good return as well, just simply because the market is going up. But anyway, so jokes aside, I do believe that in the service industries, obviously for very menial tasks such as research, doing some more digging, getting some more information, these very, let's say, low level tasks that you normally would do with an intern are actually getting replaced by AI. And it does have a productivity gain and a time efficiency surplus through that. But again, when it comes to financial advice, when it comes to legal advice, that's really where the human comes back in, because in this case, the human really plays the role of the responsible person for that particular advice. And I think that's also from a legal standpoint really important. And this is not going to get disrupted or replaced by AI. So at least this is how I look at it from on the service industries when it comes to AI. Again, as a summary, I believe menial tasks get replaced by AI, but there is always this human component, just simply from a legal point of view, to have someone to be responsible for the kind of work or mental activity that was performed.
Love to get your thoughts as well, Rod. Having been, I guess, probably one of the most expensive service job in the world, which is software developer, would also love to hear your thoughts around what are your views around services being disrupted by AI, especially AI and wealth and legal.
If we just focus on, so here the topic of legal, specifically contract management and so on, really what I have seen in the last couple of years is how the industry has been adapting, where I normally monitor what is happening in the job market in terms of which AI opportunities are appearing, which type of profiles are being looked in the market, who is being sought after and so on. And what that struck me was that more and more service businesses, they're building complete AI teams. They're not just, let's say, paying to Microsoft or Accenture or whatnot to build a solution for them, but rather they're building this competence in-house. So for example, if we think about legal, Linklaters, very large and well-known so legal services firm, they actively look for developers to build AI applications. Let's not talk about, for example, all the accounting, so the big four accounting firms like KPMG, Ernst & Young, and so on. LinkedIn is full of job ads. So for example, jobs at so Ernst & Young, at KPMG, and so similar businesses. And it's obvious why, because in the end, in all these processes that happen in these companies, it's pretty much knowledge management. So you have a lot of documents that come in various formats, Excel files, PDFs, emails, and so on, back and forth. And someone needs to make sense out of it and produce a summary of it. In the case of accounting firms, you get all the transactions of a business, and you need to put, let's say, like a little spreadsheet that says this is the financial situation of the business. And in the case of, for example, legal, it is coming up with some opinion. I was saying, okay, this is a contract that has 600 pages. You as a business, this is what you should do about it. This is what is good about it. This is what is good. This is what you should modify. This is what you should negotiate. All of this is very intuitive for any type of AI application to solve. And that's why I'm not surprised at all. So also, for example, here in the UK, there is this company called Robin AI, where its focus is exactly that, is managing contracts or type of legal documents, and providing lawyers an assistant to help them craft these contracts, understand contracts better, and so on. Because very often, even for experts, the terminology, the wording, what is there is not clear or is open for interpretation. So more than really replacing these legal experts is pretty much about modifying them, making them more efficient, being able to dig through more documents.
That's great. I think, basically using, once again, I guess AI as a co-pilot within the services business is where I guess both of you see things are going, rather than replacing humans entirely, or at least not on the complex tasks as we see. I think with legal, there are a lot of redlinings going on back and forth. Having an AI know when and what to redline, especially on the simple stuff based on your organizational preference, that would be super helpful. And I guess with that, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Rod, you mentioned a little bit about how Linklaters is trying to hire a lot of developers doing things in-house. In light of that, obviously, Goldman Sachs, of all the people of large corporate, basically wrote that, a new report is Gen AI, too much to spend with too little benefit. They quoted that tech giants and beyond are spending over 1 trillion on AI on capex in coming years. So far, we haven't get much to show for it. At least, in from a GDP / overall benefit of the use case perspective. Put aside all the, I would say tools, tech access that has been sold. Basically, Goldman is arguing for how large corporates hasn't seen a lot of the big uplift on the Gen AI use cases. What are your thoughts? Maybe I'll start with Rod.
First, the article is very comprehensive. This is something where we should just do a show entirely dedicated to go through it and dissect it. And but the general tenor of the article is, let's say, like the more critical, maybe pessimistic view of what's going on with generative AI. Some of that we have discussed it throughout our episodes, where we're saying, yes, a lot of this is happening. There is a lot of potential, but this is not being fully materialized. And just a couple thoughts from this article. So the first one is taking the contrarian view and saying, actually, they're not seeing the full picture. When I go through the different experts that are consulted and what they're saying, one of the things that I notice is that they're focusing mostly on model capability and saying the next GPT, whatever it is, GPT-5, however they want to call it, will not be so incrementally that much better than the current one, such that if we extrapolate this trend, it will not be possible that with all the investment that we're doing, we'll be able to recoup this investment. And so it will be worth it. But they're missing a big part that nowadays is not about just the models, but it's really about the systems. So to give you a simple example, if you go, let's say, just to ChatGPT and you say, which day is today? It can tell you the day. It can tell you today it is, in our case, today is Wednesday, and it can give you in the time. But this is not coming from the model itself. This is coming from other systems that are providing this information to the model. And this is what is happening. For example, if we go back to our topic of linklaters and so here legal documents, one part is the model that is summarizing, assessing these documents, but a big part around it, maybe much larger than the model itself, is these document processing pipelines that are in the background that need to take the PDF files, each page, segment it, modify it, prepare it for the models to be processed and so on. All these are very complex processes, and a lot of innovation is happening, and the improvements and advancements are taking place, let's say, around the model itself, in the architecture, in the infrastructure, more so than in model improvements. So along through that, we can see that maybe they are not seeing the full picture behind.
That's interesting. That's I guess it's almost like a fool for it. With the advancement of all the different technology, I think there are some tasks that can and will be automated. It's just we haven't quite realized all of that. And then your point around focusing on the models, and we haven't quite see all the uplift from it entirely, but that doesn't mean that it won't come, right? How about your view, Chris?
I think the report is very refreshing because I think for the longest time we've seen a lot of buzz, a lot of news on, oh my God, like AI is going to change everything. And we spoke about different industries getting disrupted. We think about different jobs getting replaced. And I think this is a stark difference, and it's refreshing because it really tries to show that maybe AI is not what we think it is. And perhaps that's also catering to Goldman Sachs's customer base, not having to change. I don't know. So maybe that's one part. But jokes aside, I think the main gist of this article is it's incredibly expensive for two reasons. And I think these two reasons we also discussed. One is it takes massive amounts of energy. So data centers, we spoke about that, and that is a fact. And then I think the other part is you need the data somewhere, and getting that data is also getting more and more expensive. And we're hitting a plateau in terms of more data that you can consume and get in order to train your models. And this makes these models inhibitantly expensive. And I think that's really what the article and the report is exploring. And I think the question is like, oh, will we see the kind of upsides that everyone believes in to justify the capex? And maybe just to zoom into the micro level, which is a corporate. And I think a lot of corporate leaders are thinking about this question of how much of their capex are they supposed to spend to develop their own application layers on different models, or hiring a whole data science AI team. And I think that's also where we see a little bit of hesitance, a little bit around what are we supposed to do with it, and do we actually see the benefits? And I think that's at this point in time not 100% clear. And so I do believe that there's value in the article to argue for, okay, well, it's going to be 1 trillion in capex spending. Is it justified? And when are we going to see the benefits? But Max, what was your thinking around that?
I read somewhere, literally on the same vein, is, when the internet came, the internet was very much a cheap solution for people to reduce or do simple tasks in a way. So you and I could share knowledge, share items to make commerce work, etc. Or at least share information of items so that we could mail it to each other. Whereas on the other hand, when it comes to technology like AI, the spend initially is very, very high for you to do complex tasks. At least that's the, I guess, goal aspiration. I think from my personal use cases, so the things that I'm doing right now, I do, I guess, a fair amount of research and searching for information and organizing those information. It hasn't yet replaced my workflow entirely. So from a micro standpoint, and then of course I question then how much of other workflow has been replaced by AI or enhanced by AI. And then I guess I was just asking myself, if I were to break down my day-to-day workflow, how much time am I saving by using, Gen AI? So far, I guess I am a little bit of a noob, right? So it still takes me time to learn a lot of the right prompt to get to the right answer. Therefore, from a task perspective, I haven't reached that level yet, right? So in the report, it talks about some sort of killer application. I haven't quite get to that killer application yet, or even if it's just searching for better information, like the cost to do a Google search is a lot cheaper compared to doing a Google search on ChatGPT, for example. Hence, I can do a lot more search on Google, even if I get it wrong. So I guess my sense, I'm very positive about the potential of the technology, but I haven't quite see that in my day-to-day work. I am, happy to be proven wrong. If someone can tell me how to do my job better, I'll take that and learn that, and then let's all be more, I guess, positive about it.
I want to say that I have like a couple of comments about that. So of this article, because you're saying the time. So they're saying the killer app. So for internet was something like e-commerce. It really depends when you are thinking when the internet started. Are you thinking internet started like commercial internet starting like in 1994 or in 2000 and so on? Because let's just think, when was the first time that you bought something online? And I'm quite sure that likely it was not in the mid 90s. Like really normal people starting buying things online much later. And they're saying, yes, Amazon had a better business model than Barnes and Nobles because they didn't have any type of infrastructure. But that's not entirely true, because it took a lot of investment and to convince people to buy online. So you had to provide free returns. You also have to do a lot about fraud and so on. For a very long time, nobody wanted to buy online for a simple fact of saying, what happens if my credit card is stolen? Or just the fact that what if it's a fraud and my product never arrives? So depending on when we think the internet started and we think, okay, we are in year 2 of AI, then we can like compare. And I would say internet started around 1994. So we are in the year 1996. And let's think in 1996, what was the killer application of the internet? Likely it was just emails. And if we think what is the killer application of AI, well, it is at the moment question answering, summarization, chat.
Yeah, and maybe I provide a different perspective on this. I think again, also your article you shared earlier on contract management, right? DocuSign, and I think they purchased some AI tool or company to like make it more AI-fied. And honestly speaking, the question is really like, do people pay more money now that there's a bit of AI there? And I think the simple answer is probably no. It's not the reason for you to buy a certain service just simply because they added AI into it. So I think from a use case and application level, it's questionable if this is going to help increase companies' revenues. I think the other perspective on this is also maybe there are these two scenarios going forward. Either there's going to be this almost like next major shift in AI, generative AI, maybe general AI intelligence, and that could actually, lead to really taking out whole departments and lead to some kind of killer applications. Or perhaps the second scenario is that people will actually dial down some of their investments and put it into something else. Because at the end of the day, from a company perspective, it's always a trade-off of where do you allocate your resources. And if every company would do that, then obviously the 1 trillion would actually not be 1 trillion, but maybe only 70% of it. And then that's going to be very interesting to see what that world would look like with, NVIDIA stock so high. We've talked about that already. The semiconductor companies are ramping up and trying to really meet demand. And then from a macro level, that's going to shift quite a bit.
Either way, it's good for them to test it out. At the moment, it's almost like we're in the testing phase. In the 1996, everyone's just trying to, I don't know, back then nobody put all their website online. Consumers were just going online. So 1996, I was very young. I don't remember using it, but yeah, I think I didn't actually get to internet until like 2000. So at least from my experience, it's all about, I guess, sending emails, searching information online, and basically learn as much as possible online. I guess, just to shift gear a little bit, obviously we talk about, we're all a little bit bullish around how AI would potentially come. There might be some bifurcation for certain corporates, there might not be. I think in there they talk about, what are the different things that we can make AI better and eventually help us to get to the aspirational state that we would like to get to. And I thought, would love to get both your thoughts around this. They talk a little bit about how, the S curve of technology tend to evolve over time. And then, have some sort of benchmarking on what the plateau looks like today and what else can we do. So I would love to, I guess, both get both your thoughts. This time I'll probably start with you, Chris. Given that we talk a little bit about how, corporate also eventually will figure out where do they sit with the AI plateau.
AI getting inhibitively expensive, and I think one part is because of the data drain. We spoke about that before as well, and I think this article in particular continues to talk about, okay, well, basically all the public available data is now absorbed, and really how to unlock the next phase may or may not be to get to enterprise data or proprietary data. And I think what I found very thrilling is some of their quotes around, for example, Zoom having so much more hours of conversation. I think it might have been in the trillions, like 3.3 trillion of meeting minutes versus YouTube's 150 million hours. So that's really like significantly more data that you can actually tap into. And again, this is again the conversation where do corporates now believe in AI and are they willing to invest capex and really do something with their data? Or are they just going to ignore it because it's not going to, get that powerful? Because if you think about it, all these companies that have so much data, most of them do not really leverage any of that data in a really good way to see that in the top line. But then again, if you were to build your own proprietary model, which I think a couple of them are doing, then you could actually build something very specific, for example, that could be much better in your customer support, right? Because you have all these different hours of conversation, the patterns, etc. And I think this is really a very attractive and interesting way to go, but it really requires corporate leaders or leaders in general to be open-minded and entrepreneurial and take that risk.
How about you, Rod? What do you think of the article?
It is, let's say, like the positive, the optimistic take of this Goldman Sachs one, where the Goldman Sachs one says pretty much, we're doing all these investments, we'll not get any type of payback and so on. It is a little bit of like sunk costs and it will be lost, or at least it will be disappointment. Whereas this one from Emergence is a much more optimistic one. And they mention some things that we have been saying on the show. First is that we're running out of data, public data. That, for example, OpenAI has been using YouTube videos, transcript and audio from YouTube videos to train their neural models. But even there is, of course, a ceiling. There are not unlimited number of YouTube videos around. And then what's next? And one of the things that they suggest is that we should start using internal data and so on, as just Chris was explaining. The other thing that I see is that we should not forget that part of the limitations that we currently have with the things that we see in terms of AI is because of the lack of talent. It is people don't often see that you cannot do this type of AI products with your classic web developer, with your classic software engineer. This is a different technology. This is one that is of not deterministic output. Traditionally, when I do some application, I, let's say, have an input, I get a specific output, and I can test for this output. I always know what's going on. With AI products, this is not the case. This is something where I can pass an input, and the output can be every time very different. And for that reason, the profile that one needs to build these products is different. There are not enough people for that. And this is also something that personally I am very fond of, where I'm trying to push for the creation of a profession called AI product engineer. So where I'm saying, on one side, we have this technology that has lowered the threshold for people to adopt AI. But at the same time, those who can develop applications, they're not there yet. So we need somehow to upskill them in order to be able to develop things. So I do think that maybe we might be hitting in some areas, in some corners, some limitations. But I do think that there are solutions for that. On one side, what we were saying earlier, we have to think not about the models, but about the systems, what is happening around the application. We also have to think about the talent, who is doing this application. And finally, this topic of the data. So yeah, every company has hundreds of thousands of PDF and so on somewhere in some systems. Very often they're just there because there is no way to pull them out. The systems are legacy, systems are too old. So the only way is pretty much like to do copy paste from one system to the other in order to make it work. So in that sense, I think that there are like so many pillars that we can tackle in order to, let's say, move to the next phase. And if we're hitting some threshold, then yeah, it's very easy to go to the next phase.
Both of you on the view on AI plateau, especially around, once you hit on the data side, which is the raw material of building a good model, as well as, the skills and the processes to turn that data into something of use from a model perspective. And then, how would corporate approach this, really comes down to the economics of whether or not it makes sense. I guess in my head, it begs the question on, is this a long-term capital expenditure and therefore you have some value that you'll be able to capture from it? So think of it like if you were able to invest in an infrastructure project, you'll be able to see the return on, say, that you own that asset per se. But a lot of all this, I would say, software as well as models, they're generally not captured as a physical asset on a balance sheet or a P&L. So I find that quite interesting. Would love to see how we would eventually approach that, especially when it comes to AI. Technically, it's an intangible asset, accounting wise. So far, we have seen a lot of capital going in. And there's a recent article that I read from Street Press, which is around the, I would say, the economics of general intelligence. I guess it's in the vein of what we're talking about right now, which is, if we just thinking about throwing money at a problem, will we be able to, I guess, leapfrog physics in a way? It's almost, like we need to be somehow pragmatically or technically pragmatic while we're spending a lot of money, which is a little bit aligned with some of the things that we'll be talking about with how corporates would eventually adopt AI. So I guess with that, maybe I'll start off with you, Chris. What are your thoughts around, I guess, the article as well as what are the implications around this?
I don't know. My first thought was, let's say there were aliens that are of higher intelligence come to Earth and they look at our development and the technology, etc. Don't you think that they might think that everything is very manual? Like, I don't know, we build these data centers, we try to connect everything, we try to build these chips, and the point I'm trying to make here is, I mean, to really get AI to the next level, what we need is almost like a hardware evolution, or like a step change in terms of chips, processing power. The way we're doing it is not sustainable. I mean, we spoke about the inhibitive cost of running generative AI from a data perspective, from an energy perspective. And it seems like really the biggest inhibitor for the next generation of AI is hardware driven or battery driven or energy driven. And, just imagine we'd had some, alien technology that would power very differently. I think this is really the initial thought I got when I think about this article.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it reminds me of Marvel, right? In which, you have adamantium, which is a metal that doesn't exist, but does stronger, faster, cheaper. At the same time, also has, I don't know, I would say a tesseract, which allows you to have unlimited power to go. I guess, for AI to become big, the basis of, I guess, in the article, it says that the basis of a near-term utopia where development costs are low, inference is cheap, hardware bottlenecks cease to exist, pricing is low, capabilities are extremely high. The question is, how many of that are we hitting? I'd love to get your thoughts, Rod, on the overall view on the, I guess, feasibility or technical pragmatism that we're trying to push for here.
The gist of the article is pretty much of the dangers of extrapolation. So they are arguing that if you look at some graph and so on, and then you can think if we continue investing in this path and then we're getting more expensive models, but also more capable models and so on, maybe at some point we'll reach the point in the graph where we have this general superintelligence, or we unlock the next level of productivity and so on and so forth. And then they come up with a series of arguments why this linear extrapolation doesn't make sense. In practice, will not happen. And I agree largely with that. I think it's a mistake to think that with the current set of technologies, with the current set of research and so on, we're set on a path of general intelligence and so on. By far right now, what we have with the current technology is just to be very efficient and achieve high levels of productivity for individual tasks. We're not aiming at creating machines that think autonomously and so on. Very often in the language that we use in the general press and also just in the day-to-day when we refer to about all these AI models, make it sound very human. So we anthropomorphize it. But in practice, in fact, this is nothing intelligent. The models do not know what they are generating. The models are not smart at all and so on and so forth. And I do agree, and also I can connect it with the previous article, that in fact, we need some sort of like edge-shaped development, so where we need, not only as Craig was saying, we need different advancement in hardware, in consumption of, so the energy consumption of the chipsets, and now how efficient they are and so on. Also together in the theory of how these models work at all. Because to put it bluntly, these models are nothing else than just, let's say, like matrix multiplications. So it's basically in the algebra in the sense what is happening. Of course, in a massive scale, of course, with a lot of engineering behind, a lot of like tricks, but of course it boils down to that. And there are so many other theories, so many other possibilities how this could be done that need to be explored. And unfortunately, what happens is that a lot of this research, it doesn't really work in industrial settings, in production settings, or maybe like in the lab, maybe like in some academic environment, in some maybe hypothetical situation, it can get better results. But the moment in practice, what's giving us good results is what we have. And also like another topic connecting now with, so here our article from Goldman Sachs is the following: over optimization for specific hardware. So one risk that we do in this run, or that we can run into, it is that at the moment, everyone is buying all these NVIDIA chips and so on. So then you tend to focus on how you can maximize, how you can squeeze all the juice from this NVIDIA chipset. But the best ways to get the best performance for this NVIDIA chipset might not necessarily lead to this performance and this improvement that you need in order to get a better, or let's say like achieve general intelligence or the next level of AI. So you can picture it of, let's say, if you're walking around in a mountain, there are multiple paths how you can get to the top of the mountain. And some of these paths might be more efficient than others. And once you get in one path, it becomes very, very hard to get to another one. So you deviate too much, it is too tiresome, too complicated, and so on. And it can be that we're like that. We're setting some path towards the mountain. Is this path the best one? Is this path the most efficient one? Who knows? But potentially other paths that are there that can be better. For us, it will become close to impossible to get there given the circumstances that we have at the moment with our hardware, with like the current technologies and so on.
That's an interesting view, especially if you, I guess, look from the outside. You're almost thinking of, we're at a point in time in which there is a risk and reward for the path in which we choose. Just because we have chosen this doesn't mean this is necessarily the right path for everything that's developing in that sense. I guess that's super interesting. And then maybe through this path that we choose, we might get to some sort of alien technology where we will become powerful, or maybe we will not. If should we have chosen a separate path, maybe that would have gotten us there. So I guess the question is, are we overcommitting ourselves, over extrapolating what is happening right now in order to get to where we are? I think, at least at the moment, we haven't quite seen all the use cases turn up yet. But who knows? Maybe in a couple of weeks, something new might come up. So we remain positive, I guess, and bullish about it. But at the same time, we need to bring some pragmatism to that. And on the note of pragmatism, we have some interesting scoop, I guess, for I guess readers that are outside of Germany. I will call it a scoop because for a person who reads English media all the time, or occasionally Malay from Malaysia, I don't generally read anything from German publications. But thank you so much, Rod, for sharing this. There has been an article around Aleph Alpha. And I guess I'll probably start with you, Rod, just to give everyone a little bit of background on Aleph Alpha. And also, I guess, just to get your thoughts around the scoop of Aleph Alpha, which is, the title, again, is extremely provocative, which is around Aleph Alpha's inflated 500 million funding. And I like how they, at the top, they put exclusive AI hope. So I found the article quite amusing. So, over to you, Rod. Maybe I'll start with you. Maybe explain a little bit, for those who don't know Aleph Alpha very, very well, given that, it's more prevalent in the German ecosystem.
Absolutely, and I think there's here so much to say that maybe we can like split it where I explain now, so what is AlephAlpha and also like the product and so on, and then Chris can get deeper into this topic of the evaluation that they're having or they're not having. And AlephAlpha is one of these things where it's very curious how there is a little bit of a dissonance in this space, where in Germany pretty much is known by almost everyone, or let's say almost everyone who is like in a business environment, in a startup environment, technology environment, and so on, because it has a lot of presence in the media. So, for example, this national newspaper, Handelsblatt, they had a long coverage, like more than 15 pages, some months ago about the company. And the front page of the issue, it said, Europe should hope that this entrepreneur has success, referring to the founder of AlephAlpha. But what is AlephAlpha? Well, AlephAlpha is a company based in Germany, started in 2019. It has evolved over time where they started and what they're doing now. But pretty much they're trying to position themselves as some sort of, let's say, more private, more transparent, more compliant open AI, where they're saying we need to have sovereignty in Europe with technology. We also need to have a better control of the data and so on. And ideally, we should not give this to US companies. They're trying to do this not only by having their own models, but also by developing their own data centers. They have been building infrastructure around. So they're claiming, yes, OpenAI through Microsoft, they can provide additional privacy. You can host your data in the Azure instances hosted in Europe and so on. But in the end, this is Microsoft. In the end, you can really trust them. For example, if the FBI comes over and then asks them for data, then likely they need to comply because they're a US company. Whereas with us, we're based in Germany, we're safer, we're more secure. The company has been on the news permanently, so for the last years. And I remember last year I was using their model they had available. They had a demo. And now this is no longer possible. Now they put a registration wall and I cannot get access anymore. But what struck me was how many of these claims that they were touting, I couldn't really verify them, where they were saying our model is much more grounded, or more than our model, our product. So this product that they're developing is much more grounded in reality, that it provides maybe like some sourcing, it is fact-based, it is more transparent and so on. And I was testing it. And not only me, but also there were journalists who wrote about it. Or for example, something that made into the news was that if you will write, where do women belong? Then the model will answer, they belong in the kitchen. Or if you will ask, why is there so much criminality in Berlin? The model will reply, because there are too many foreigners. So already, from the get-go, it was labeled as a bit of a sexist, racist model and so on. In my case, I just queried about things that are more like German focused. I was saying, okay, this is a model for like Germany and so on, so it should know a lot of like German related news or the German ecosystem and so on. So I was asking, so who is Oliver Samber, who is a very famous German entrepreneur in the internet space? And it's something that at the time, ChatGPT could answer it very easily. Could provide also when the person was born, the right date, the right place, the right occupation. AlephAlpha could not answer any of that. All of that was wrong. And that really surprised me because I was thinking, hey, how can it be that the companies touted as being the next OpenAI can have such a lousy product? While meanwhile, we have in France, like really real contenders against OpenAI, which are, for example, Mistral, or now there was a new release of a new startup that also is like on the same category of Mistral and House of Pricing, their models are and so on. Whereas AlephAlpha, it seems that they're not on the same category, even though in Germany, everyone will say, hey, this is like the answer, the alternative to OpenAI.
Thank you so much, Rod, for the explanation. I guess as Rod suggested, Chris, what are your thoughts around the article? I guess especially in the accusation saying that they didn't actually raise their $500 million, they really just raised 100 million, with the other 400 million coming from R&D somewhere that is being shared with multiple AI companies. So I'd love to get your thoughts, Chris.
Yeah, I have three perspectives on this article or this whole Aleph Alpha story here. I think 500 million, such a raise in Germany is a huge amount of money. Like, we're not talking about the US and where money gets thrown at you. It's Germany tends to be more conservative on that side, and so I think this was the reason why it was such a big thing that startup was able to raise such a huge amount. And honestly speaking, I think the article that we have here at hand talking about this being a PR stunt and oh my God, like it's inflated, etc. I think it's really more about getting eyeballs here, and actually it doesn't really matter how much money they've raised. I think it's more about the German ecosystem around raising and the amounts you can actually raise here, and that not being true, right? But I think the more critical point is actually what Rod mentioned, which is how good is the model and can it actually compete with, the open AIs in the world? And I think that is really where the disappointment really stands, because I think if we were to zoom out, a lot of people in Germany, a lot of companies in Germany are thinking about, okay, how competitive is Germany as a country anymore when it comes to digitization, innovation, technology? And I think for that reason, Aleph Alpha was such a big hope that it could, be the European answer, maybe next to Mistral, to really be of a counterweight to the American models. And I think from a company perspective, corporate perspective, lots has been talked about in board meetings around, okay, should we maybe collaborate or try out Aleph Alpha, a homegrown German solution that is more secure and we trust it more than maybe the Americans. And I think that didn't really pan out. And I think this is really where the disappointment really comes from. So my point, in other words, I don't think it matters how much money they've really raised when it comes to talking about Aleph Alpha. It really is more a point around the ecosystem. But I think more importantly, is the model really on par with the competitors is the real question. And here is really where the disappointment is. And I think that's also where maybe companies become a bit more cautious when it comes to trying these models, because, well, I don't know what happened with all the partnerships that they've actually signed and whether or not people are trying to get out of those.
Here to add to that is that, so for example, website of the city of Heidelberg, where Aleph Alpha is so located, they are powered by actually this Aleph Alpha chatbot and so on. So you can in theory test it and see what it offers and see its power. And it's funny because I was looking at screenshots, so where it was asked, so where can I go to have a food in Heidelberg? And they would recommend and say, where can I go to, for example, have a Michelin star experience in Heidelberg? And they will recommend just like regular restaurants or restaurants do not exist at all and so on. So here, it is something where, in the end, we can see what we have been discussing in all this episode is how one thing is the model, and maybe this model might be much better than others, but the other thing is also about like the system around. And maybe the model is good in the case of Aleph Alpha, but then the system is built around to have the application power in it, where it will have all these extra details of good Michelin restaurants in Heidelberg, factual sources and so on. This is maybe not as well developed. And here what I see is that the debate is, for example, in this topic of Aleph Alpha of what is the consequences for the German ecosystem, and that it's not possible to raise that amount of money and so on. But just right next to Germany, there is really France. So when Mistral and so on, where Mistral has also raised significant amounts, but they really do have a lot of things to show for, where pretty much every 3 months and so on, they have a massive model release, they have massive improvements, and this is transparent, this is useful for everyone and so on. Whereas for Aleph Alpha, not only they do not release anything in the public, but also their platform itself is not really open, and also has like some issues in how it's developed. For example, I was playing with it earlier today, and even like the links internally, if you go to the website Aleph Alpha and then you want to sign up for this product that they have, and you want to, for example, check like the pricing and so on, the page is broken. It brings you to like a page that doesn't exist at all and so on. So how can it be that a company that is supposed to have raised 500 million has all these little basic details, such as not having correct linking, not fixed, is for me so very surprising. I'm thinking, what's going on in this company? What is really behind the curtains? What is happening there?
And folks, there you have it. We have Liske from Aleph Alpha. For those who are interested, please go and try out and check out what Rod say. If it's right or not, it'll be good to get your thoughts. If you have any sort of screenshots, feel free to send it to us. Just to wrap up today, thank you so much for joining us. Again, Rod and Chris, and also to our listeners. Today, we talk a little bit about use cases in the services business, focusing on wealth management and legal. We also talk a little bit about Goldman Sachs research around whether or not we're spending too much on AI with too little to show. But at the same time, we also have an emergence article that talks about how we could, overcome the AI plateau to help us get to a certain space. And we also spent some time talking about the economics of the hardware for all the different type of AI that we're trying to build. And last but not least, we cover a little bit on Aleph Alpha. That's a lot. And if you like what you're listening here, please give us a like, subscribe, and we will see you next week on the Chris Rod Max Show.